Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Hope you've had a fab weekend. I'm delighted because today we are live on Facebook and on LinkedIn. I'm going to be chatting with my dear friend, Jen Smollett, and she is an authenticity and leadership coach, as well as being a lovely lady and such a great friend. And we're going to be talking about 3 common biases that affect women in the workplace. So as people are logging on, do let us know if you can hear us all okay. Give us a like or an emoji, and also let us know your experiences of bias in the workplace. If you have been affected by bias or you've witnessed bias in the workplace, do let us know. It's always great to hear your examples and your stories. So thank you so much, Jen, for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to chat with you and obviously talk about this topic. I mean, before we dive in, do you want to give people a bit of a quick overview as to who you are and what you do and who you help?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I am Jen Smollett and I am a women's leadership coach. And I am so passionate about supporting women to rise as high as they possibly can and want to in the workplace. And of course, unconscious biases are one of the things that do impact that success. And I help women by supporting them with their authenticity, their resilience, and their confidence, and building those 3 things up, whilst at the same time recognizing the elements of the system and the workplace that will impact on women's confidence, authenticity, and resilience. So it's always two-way. It's probably something we'll get into as we're going on, but I'm kind of really becoming more and more passionate about not fixing women, and actually the focus being very much on outside of women. It's a lot of things outside of women that impact on their confidence and their resilience and whether or not they feel able to be authentic. And so it's a full holistic approach to those three elements.
I love that. Obviously, you know, I did read when it came out, Lean In by Sharon. Is it Sharon Sandberg? And it felt like it was and she actually, you know, she gave some really good advice and really good tips, but it was about fixing us, I think. I mean, it was a long time since I read it. It might not all be like that, but interesting. Really, and I think
a lot of messages out there are really focused on fixing women. And actually, you know, I call myself a confidence coach for a while, and then actually you realize that even in my own messaging at the minute, I'm really trying to figure out the message that I want to put out there, because I don't want to be part of a story that is about fixing women, because actually we don't need to be fixed. Women don't need to be fixed to be amazing. They need resilience, confidence, and authenticity to be able to fight the external system that is working against them.
Absolutely. And I suppose as well, companies to reject that macho culture that they've probably promoted and encouraged in the past, and realize, you know, appreciate all people's skills and experience. So brilliant. So can you share some of the common biases? I know we're talking about 3 common biases. So 3 common biases that face women in the workplace, particularly, you know, in 2023, and how they can affect their career growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, before I dive into the 3, is just to kind of give you a quick overview, I suppose, of the fact of what unconscious bias is and what we mean by unconscious bias. What we mean by unconscious bias is that actually there are only so many things that we can process ourselves. It puts so many pieces of information. And so actually what we need is for unconscious processes to automatically make decisions and process the world around us. And that unconscious automatic processes, they all are based on things, our own past experiences, as well as things and messages and things that we've been taught in the past. And so unconscious biases are part of who we all are. We all have them, and actually it would be lovely to be like, oh no, I've worked through mine, I don't have them anymore. But actually we all have them. We all work unconsciously all of the time, as well as consciously. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is to highlight the fact that this isn't about men having unconscious biases about women, or it is actually within all of us. So even you and I here as women, we have unconscious biases that will hamper women in the workplace. And so this is recognizing that it's within all of us. It isn't an us versus them attitude. That all of us are involved in this. So the 3 main types of bias that affect women in the workplace. The first one is motherhood bias. The
Yeah.
second one is kindness bias, and the third one is tightrope. The tightrope, it's not bias, it's a different word. Penalty, the tightrope penalty. So they're the three that I'm going to mention.
The second two, really. So obviously the motherhood, but I get. I'll let you.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about.
Really?
Yeah. So the motherhood bias is affects everybody. It affects women that are mothers, and it affects women that aren't mothers, because even women that have made the decision to not have children, they may still be impacted by the fact that an employer thinks they could have children, regardless of what their personal choice is. And then, of course, mothers. You talk about this all of the time, but actually how mothers are impacted in the workplace because of what they're expected to. So there's somebody I know who, well, actually it's somebody's sister that I know. She hired, or she brought in another woman into her workplace, and the woman that came in was new to the industry. So she gave her she mentored her and supported her, and got her up to speed. 6 months later, this woman got a promotion. The woman that she'd been mentoring got a promotion, and it was actually above her. And when she went to her manager to say, like, what's happened there, they said, well, you've got a little one, so we didn't think that you would want it because this job has more travel involved. And actually, her husband works part-time so that she can, do whatever the job takes. And so she missed out on that promotion because she was a mother without anybody factoring in what she actually wanted to do for her family and her career. So that's how the motherhood bias impacts us. It isn't just that, the things that you're fighting for around, flexible working. Of course, all of those things are important, but there's also the other side of it where actually we can't just presume that because a woman is a mother that she's not committed at work or she's any less competent at work. And that's the thing that comes up with the motherhood bias. So that's the motherhood bias.
Interesting.
Oh, go on.
I was going to say, because I was doing a podcast, and it also can go another way. It's because I was doing a podcast interview with a mum, career lady, and she sort of said during the pandemic she was really struggling. She was homeschooling 2 children, and she's a manager. She was actually trying, and she's like, it was so unfair, and I shouldn't have done it. I recognise that, distributing the work to the people in the team that didn't have children.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's
quite a lot of ways as well, and she goes, and I recognise then that was the bias and it was wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually that's the work that all of us need to do, in recognizing that we all have that. We all make these decisions that impact on women, whether they're mothers or whether they're not. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's some research as well about women who are not mothers, who feel like their workplace don't see their lives outside of work as important as the lives outside of work as mothers, because mothers have children, and therefore somehow that is given more impetus and more importance. And actually, of course, that's not true either. All of our lives outside of work are important. So yeah, there's loads around that one. And then the second one is kindness, the kindness bias. And this is based around feedback that's given in the workplace. So the research has found that the majority of women receive feedback in a way that is kind. And it's not necessarily even about the people giving it think that women need kindness.
Did you mean it's kind but not helpful?
Exactly. Okay. So it's kind, and the main focus is on it being kind, and therefore it's not actionable. So it's actually less helpful for the woman that's receiving it, because actually it's based on kindness. Exactly what the bias is. It's based on kindness. And so it doesn't give them something actionable and tangible that they can do to improve themselves in the workplace. And so actually they kind of receive this feedback, doesn't really mean a lot, and then they move on. And actually within that, we need to recognize that there are other things within that feedback. So there's research that was looking at Black students, and they found that actually the feedback that was given was inflated. So it was made more positive than it would have been, based on the fact that those people wanted to make sure that they weren't being racist, or to make sure they weren't appearing as racist. And therefore that feedback, it was inflated, more positive than it should have been, and therefore that's less actionable as well. And so if we think about women of colour, for example, if there is the biases against that are working towards rather making sure that somebody isn't being racist, as well as the kindness bias because of them being a woman, then perhaps there's even more things that influence the feedback, making it less actionable and less able to be able to make changes to improve themselves in the future.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
really interesting. You said at the beginning that people have unconscious bias. Everybody. So we, you know.
Yeah, you and me. I mean, there's even ways of the way that I'm talking where some biases will be coming out that someone else might be able to see, and I can't see it yet in myself. So yeah, we all have them.
So is this about getting rid of these biases, or is this just about acknowledging them and like checking yourself, a bit like the lady I spoke to last week? And then is that?
Yeah. So shall I tell you the third one and then come back?
Tell me the third one. And then we'll talk.
So the third one is the tightrope penalty, and the tightrope penalty, you might have heard like the double bind bias that women face, and it's basically around the idea of women in leadership in particular needing to be a certain way. And so if you think about the traits that are associated with a leader, think, you know, often they're associated with a white male is a typical leader. And so you find that women that are leaders are judged against how leader they are, whilst at the same time being judged on their gender. So they need to travel this tightrope, this line of being competent on the one side, but they need to balance it with warmth for the gender. So there's the competence of a leader, plus they need to be warm because female. And of course, I'm opening this out, but this is what the research shows for women in the workplace. So they need to be warm and competent. They need to be assertive but still be kind and collaborative. You know, they need to be decisive but collaborative. So they're constantly on this tightrope of balancing between being a leader and being their gender, matching their gender.
Interesting. I don't know. You remember my tightrope when you said that's interesting. I do think that we should all leaders. I'd love to work for a leader that was decisive but collaborative. You know, kind and
yeah, absolutely.
The best kind of leader to work for.
And I think it's interesting because when we think about the best kind of leader, actually, there are many different types of leaders that will lead in the best way. And that's where the authenticity piece comes in for me. Because actually, when we think about the gender, and I'm doing it in this because I don't like labels. I don't want us to have these labels, but this is what the research shows. So 25% of women would naturally lead with more masculine traits, and the same goes the other way. So of men, there are around 25% of men that would lead with feminine traits, and then the other 75% cover a whole range of other traits. But what that says to me is not necessarily what is right and wrong about being a leader, but actually finding the way that brings the best out of you as a person, for you to lead in the way that is the most authentic to you, so that you can lead people in the best way possible, whether that's masculine traits or feminine traits, but actually more true to you. And actually, most of us will have a balance within us of the competence, the warmth, the decisiveness, you know, all of the different elements that we need, we can draw out when we really truly focus on who we are as a leader.
Okay. That leads us to the next question. And it's probably not just women, but how then can we, so we all know we have biases. And we know that we are victim. I guess everybody's a victim of being biased against as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
And you know, I guess how then can we take control of our own biases and also the biases that we may face as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's another 3-step. three is the magic number today. So there's 3 steps. It's awareness, reflection, and compassion. So the first one is awareness. So often we're not even aware. Well, we're not aware. That's the very point of it. They're unconscious and therefore we're not aware of them. And so what we want to do is try to raise our awareness. So just like the person that you were talking to, she didn't realize it at the time, but she's realized it since. And actually, the more we can be aware of ourselves in situations and check in with ourselves and draw right into our consciousness and think, what am I basing this decision on? And actually, if we know those 3 biases, for example, with the motherhood bias, if you notice that you're making a decision with somebody that you're leading and they are a mother or they're not a mother, you can ask yourself, am I making this decision based on the fact that they're a mum, or am I making this decision based on the person in front of me and what they want? So that's the first step, is awareness. Now, within that, of course, it's always easier to see this in other people. So maybe before you even start checking in on your own biases, maybe recognizing bias in other people and becoming aware of other people's bias will help you to start to just bring it more into your own awareness.
Yeah,
is the first step. And then the second step is reflection. So if you notice in yourself that you may have made a decision based on the fact that this person is a woman or is a mum or is whatever, actually, either during the situation, reflecting on it and thinking, what is happening here? What's going on? What am I thinking? What do I believe about this situation? Or after the situation, you can reflect back on it much again, like the lady that you were talking to. If you look back and think, right, okay, I made this decision, but it was probably because I was believing this. And actually what I would have wanted to believe is this. And then we can learn from it. And next time you're less likely to be impacted by that specific unconscious bias that you've been affected by before. And the other part of reflection is to reflect back to other people as well. So, for example, if you hear a colleague talking about someone who's a mum who and there's something in what they're saying that they just don't think that this person is very good at their job, or they're kind of questioning their competence, then that's a moment for you to reflect to that person what their biases are. And of course, you can challenge it based on how comfortable you feel with that person. You might want to call it out, but you might not want to call it out. But if you don't want to call it out, because it's hard, actually,
it's
really hard to call it out.
whatever.
Yeah. So what you can do is actually you can ask questions, you can get curious, and that will reflect it back. So actually you could ask a question like, what makes you think that? What makes you think that they're not committed? Or you could ask them what the evidence is to show that they're not committed. Or you could reflect to them that actually you've noticed that they achieved this, this, and this. Finding ways that actually don't necessarily challenge the bias, but find a way of opening up a conversation that might just reflect to that person the thoughts that they are having. So to get curious. And then the third step is compassion. And this is having compassion for yourself as a victim of bias. It's having compassion to yourself of being a perpetrator of bias. And it's also having compassion towards other people who are either being a victim of bias or having biases themselves. And actually, that compassion piece is really important when we think if we're raising our awareness of our biases, having unconscious bias, we know that means that we're making decisions that are not right for other people. And so that means that we're not good people. And actually, that's a really hard thing. It's A, not true, and B, it's really hard to recognize a bias in yourself. And so actually, if we can have the awareness and the reflection, but then with compassion, recognize that everybody does have unconscious biases. And what matters is that we're being aware, we're reflecting, and then we can make a difference rather than beating ourselves up about having something that actually everybody does have.
Yeah. So I guess the tightrope bias and feeling that you have to be decisive, yet kind. I guess a lot of it is that imposter syndrome, feeling that you have to be a certain person to be successful in your work. So how can people overcome this imposter syndrome and self-doubt and actually have the confidence to become more authentic and more themselves at work?
Yeah. So this is, I always come back to this, and you've heard me talk about this before, but knowing your values, knowing what your own core values are is the key. Because actually, when you're striving to be something that other people think that you should be, that takes up a whole heap of cognitive resources and a whole heap of energy, actually, to be somebody else, or to be who you think you should be. Sometimes the leader we think we should be is different to who we actually are. And so the first step always would be to identify what your core values are. And actually, I do 5 because ideally you'll have 5. And actually, they're the things that can be conscious, so they can help you with those biases, but they can also help you to just ground you back to you as a leader. So actually, compassion is one of my values, and so I will lead with compassion. It doesn't mean I always did lead with compassion. You know, I have an example of, I won't share it actually today because it's a long story and I've told so many stories already. But we all have examples of actually when we've not even acted out our values, because our unconscious biases often conflict with actually what we consciously think. And that's where having our core values, knowing what matters most to us, and then coming back to those in situations, being who you are, behaving in a way that aligns with your values, means that the focus is back on you. And actually, if you are compassionate, and it is a key thing of who you are, then that compassion will be felt by other people. If you're pretending to be compassionate because it's not one of your core values, you can be kind, but it's not something that who you are, and you're pretending to be it, then actually that makes it really difficult for the people on the receiving end, because it's never going to feel as genuine. So then you're kind of making this effort to be who you should be, as well as it being not received in the way that you want it to be. So actually coming back to who you are, being authentic, is then received as a genuine, and then everybody wins. Everybody's in a much better position.
I guess it must be quite hard to identify your core values, though. What is actually important to you? Because if you are, so you know, you're heavily influenced, aren't you, by the family you grow up in, the environment, social conditioning, expectations, etc. So how does somebody then unpick all that
to identify
what's important to them?
Yeah. So I have a free workbook. I think I might have shared it with you before, and I'm happy to share it again, to identify what your core values are. But if you essentially, I will take clients through a 3-step process, and that will be, first of all, have a look at a list of values. I have a list of values, again, that I'm happy to share. And actually, it's not exhaustive. There are so many words out there that mean so much to so many of us, but it's a starting place. And first of all, identifying the ones that jump out at you. You know, even if you Google it, you can find lists of values on Google as well. And then go through a process of asking yourself, okay, what have been the happiest times in my life? And when I have been in a situation where I've been the happiest, which values were in place at that time? So what was it that was there? So actually, for me, nurture is one of my values, you know, being nurturing. And actually, there are moments with my children when I feel like my nurturing side is fully on, and that just it makes me feel something, because it's so core to who I am. So it's one of those kind of situations. So try and think of 2 of them and draw out the values that were there in that situation. And then the next step is to think about the opposite. So think about 2 situations that you found really, really frustrating. And usually when you're really frustrated at a situation, it's because something that you value isn't present. So the opposite. So for example, maybe there's a time when you have been disrespected, and actually it has made you really frustrated, and it's just brought something up in you. Excuse me. That's most likely because your value wasn't in place. Sometimes that's the easiest place actually to bring out values. And then the third step is to think about what you were taught as a child. So I was taught respect as a child, and so that was one of my values, and it's actually not in my top 5 values anymore. And I realized that that's because I really resented the fact that I was taught to respect my elders. And I don't actually, when I think about that consciously, I don't believe in that. I think we should respect everybody until they show us that they shouldn't be respected. So actually, whether you're younger than me or older than me, I'll respect you. And if you show me that I shouldn't respect you, no matter what your age, then you will lose my respect. So it's not one of my values. So actually questioning what you were taught, do you still believe it? Is it one of your core values, or is it one that actually you would like to let go of? So that's the 3 It's probably 4 steps actually, isn't it? There's 3 step process with
That's all right. And I know we're talking about how can, the common biases affect women in the workplace. So how then can male colleagues and managers support women overcoming these biases and create more inclusive workplaces?
So I think men, all of us can do the same steps that I said before, and then and challenging bias especially is definitely key. And actually, this is where there's an opportunity for allies to step forwards in terms of supporting women in the workplace and questioning biases. And I think the key takeaway that I would like to share, I suppose, is that no matter who you are, actually seeing people as a unique individual in all circumstances at work, that's what's going to foster inclusion and belonging. Because yes, I'm a woman, yes, I'm a mum, but that doesn't mean you know me and my decisions and what I want to do in the workplace or at home.
Yeah.
So for me, everybody should see everybody as unique individuals and don't make decisions at work in particular based on what you think that person would want, but ask them.
Okay. And then obviously this is a good question. How can women balance the need to be assertive and speak up for themselves without being perceived as being bossy? So we talked about this tightrope
Penalty. Yeah, it's a great
aggressive at work, and it is all I get like that. I was like, I don't want to offend that person. I don't want that person to be upset. I don't want them to think I'm being mean.
Yeah. Well, it's the email thing, isn't it? I mean, it was trending for a while on social media, women in particular sending emails and starting it with sorry, I've not responded to your email within the hour or something like that. I think it is a good question, and honestly, I feel like the answer is quite a loaded answer. I think we have to first of all get clear on exactly what it is that we want.
Yeah.
And then we have to be conscious and aware enough to try to remove the apologies, because you have a right to ask for what you want, and therefore that's okay to ask for what you want without apologizing. So know what you want and then ask without apologizing are probably the two for this conversation. They're probably the two key things.
And I'm happy to deal with people like that. I quite like if someone's direct, you do get things done quite quickly, don't you? And that's probably one of my values. I quite like being efficient and getting through things. And then I had another question for you. Sorry. So in your experience coaching them, what are some of the most effective strategies for breaking through barriers and helping them achieve success in their careers?
Can you ask me that question again? I feel like I'm in an interview.
In your experience coaching women, what are the most effective strategies that they've used then for breaking through any barriers that they've experienced in work and achieving success?
Okay. I think it I feel like I'm just repeating myself over and over again, but I think it is getting clear on who you are and what you want. And when you are clear on who you are and what you want, that removes so much of the baggage of what you should do, what you should want, all of the expectations from outside of you, but actually looking inwards first, strengthening inwards. So I talk about this in my leadership program as well. It's kind of, we want to look inwards and we want to get what's inside really strong and those foundations laid. And we want to work on, the authenticity, who you are, the confidence to be who you are, and the resilience, of course, to be able to continue to keep moving forwards as who you are. And actually, once you have those foundations in place, it's almost like, and I love the magic of seeing this in women, but when I've done the coaching, it's like the other stuff just falls away. Women have literally said to me at the end, they're like, I can't believe I was letting those things hold me back.
Yeah.
And actually sometimes I think when you talk about the barriers, obviously we've talked about unconscious bias, the barriers are there, but sometimes we've put up quite a lot of our own barriers before the actual barriers as well. And so if you can move through your own barriers, then by the time you get to the barriers that are there and in place, you've actually built up the confidence and the resilience to be yourself and to ask for and get what you want.
I love that. That's actually made me shiver. I think that's a really good. Do you know? I think you're so right. I'm just, a lot of it is, I can't do this, I can't do that. And then once you do it, you do get that it's a muscle, isn't it? And then you think, actually, if I could do that, I can do this.
Yeah.
There's no stopping me now. And that's quite a nice, once you get in a bit of a groove, and it's obviously not like that every day for everybody, but
No. But that's one of the first things that I do with women as well when I'm coaching them, especially in the leadership space, because there are so many messages telling us we're not doing it right, we're not doing a good job. And that's, the thing of outside. And so it's not surprising that so many women are feeling like they're not, maybe not doing a great job. And actually, one of the first things we do before we start to push ourselves further going forward is actually looking back on all of the things that you've achieved. And again, that's it's one of my favorite exercises to do, because so many women, I'm like, wow, I've done a lot, actually. And I'm like, yes, you have. You've done so much. Because actually, we're just, again, we're conditioned to not shout about our successes, and therefore we forget them too. So I love reminding people of the successes that they've achieved in their lives as well.
So if people watching this and they think, I want to learn to be, I want to be me at work, I want to be more authentic and enjoy then the success that brings. How do you work with people, and how, what sort of programs and packages do you offer, and then how can people get in touch to learn more?
Bro, thank you. So I do one-to-one coaching. That's my absolute favorite. I love working with women one-on-one and can really tailor it and make it a unique process. So one-to-one coaching with me is I think the best. But I also offer, because I know that's not always accessible for everybody, so I also offer a leadership program which is called the Unstoppable Leader. And some people laugh at the name, and I think I'm working on the name myself as well, actually. But it's about becoming unstoppable and achieving whatever you want to achieve. And so that's a group coaching program. So there's taught elements, and then there's self-reflection work, and then we come together as well as a group and talk through what it is that we're learning. And that's a different experience. It's not the unique one-on-one tailored experience, but actually you then have the support of other women that are experiencing the same thing. And there's such a power, I think, of women coming together. And so the third thing that I offer, and this is a free thing, is that once a month I do, it's called the Leadership Lounge. It's just a free virtual session, which is just a connection session for women who are leaders to meet with other women who are leaders, to talk about anything and everything to do with women in the workplace. And so we meet on the first Tuesday of every month at 12 o'clock UK time.
Next week.
And all of the above options, you can just send me an email or a DM on LinkedIn, or email me at jen@jensmollett.com. It's double L and double T, just like Willits. Yep. Or check out my website. And actually, if you go to my website, there's buttons, and you can just click to book a call with me, and we can chat through the best option for you.
Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much for your time today, Jen. It's an absolute pleasure. I've loved learning about bias in the workplace and how we all have it and how to get over, overcome it. And thank you, everybody that has watched today live and on the replay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.